When you think about fast food juggernauts of today, there's obviously McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, Taco Bell, and they've been around forever. And I don't think you could imagine a day that they wouldn't be around serving millions of people every year. On this week's Top 5, we're going to look at discontinued fast food chains. Now, not all of these ever reached the heights of a McDonald's or a Wendy's. But I'm sure with some of these, when they were at their peak, it seemed like they might be around forever. Some of these places had unique ideas, different takes on popular food items. Others tried to kind of reinvent the wheel, all to varying degrees of success. Some of these you might remember, some of these you might be hearing about for the very first time, but all of these were popular to a certain degree at their peaks. So let's look at them. Top 5 discontinued fast food chains. Now, with most of these lists, of course, I've got some honorable mentions to kind of get your mind going. So, honorable mentions for discontinued fast food chains include Pumpernick, which even though it was originated in Argentina and it was around in the 70s and 80s, I included it because if you look up Pumpernick, spelled N-I-C, you tell me what their logo looks like. It's an exact copy of the old 80s, 70s Burger King logo. And yes, they were eventually sued by Burger King. There was also Burger Queen, which was around from 1956 to 1981 and had as many as 171 restaurants. It eventually became Druthers, and that also closed down. There was White Tower, which for all intents and purposes was a ripoff of the White Castle franchise. Surprisingly, they were around from 1926 all the way to 2004, despite being seen as a ripoff of White Castle almost the entire time. There was Carol's, which was another burger joint that had its peak in the 1960s, with 150 locations, mainly in upstate New York and Pennsylvania. Interestingly, their parent company is now the largest owner of Burger King franchises in the world, so that's kind of weird. And the last honorable mention is Geno's Hamburgers. Founded in Baltimore, Maryland by Baltimore Colts defensive end Geno Marchetti. They lasted from 1957 to 1982, with a peak of more than 350 locations in the Northeast. So those are the honorable mentions. Do you remember any of those? Did you eat at any of those? Maybe not Pumpernick, but the others. Well, let's dive into the actual top 5 discontinued fast food chains, starting with number 1, Burger Chef. People a little bit older than me, so probably in your 50s now, you may be very familiar with Burger Chef. They opened in Indianapolis, Indiana in 1954. So right around the same time that McDonald's and Burger King were just starting out. In fact, Burger Chef was the first one to patent the flame broiling for burgers that Burger King became famous for. They had a bunch of specialties on their menu. A double burger called the Big Chef, spelled S-H-E-F, and the Quarter Pounder called the Super Chef. Burger Chef might be most well known for their introduction of a kids meal in 1973 called the Fun Meal. And by this point in the early 1970s, Burger Chef was the second largest franchise in the world for fast food. They had 1,200 locations. And that was kind of part of the issue, was that they expanded so fast. They had animated commercials all over TV with Burger Chef and Jeff, their mascots. But the writing was kind of on the wall when McDonald's invented their Happy Meal in 1979 and Burger Chef sued them but ultimately lost. In 1982, Burger Chef was sold to the Hardee's Corporation, with most Burger Chefs being turned into Hardee's and the other ones eventually closing within a few years. Number 2 is Red Barn. This burger establishment was founded in 1961 in Springfield, Ohio by 3 men, Don Six, Martin Levine, and Jim Kirsch. Their buildings were unique because they were literal red barns. That's how they were shaped. You can find their commercials on YouTube too. They have these weird puppet mascots One was Hamburger Hungry, which was a humanoid hamburger combo with the burger bun, burger for a head. There was Fried Chicken Hungry, which was a talking chicken leg. And Big Fish Hungry, which was a blue fish. These were based off of their slogan, when the hungries hit, go to Red Barn. Their Big Barney Burger was a predecessor to the Big Mac from McDonald's. It actually predated it by a few years. They had self-service salad bars, which were forward-thinking. And they catered towards kids with coloring books and crayons, and the food being served in Red Barn-shaped boxes, although they don't say anything that I saw in my research about kids' meals. At their peak in the 1970s, Red Barn had close to 400 locations in 19 states into Canada. In the late 60s, though, the Red Barn company was sold, and the new owners simply stopped advertising for them over years. So with dwindling advertising and then the leases on the buildings being allowed to expire, the buildings just shut down. The last Red Barn closed in 1986. Number 3 is Kenny Rogers Roasters. Seinfeld fans will remember Kenny Rogers Roasters. It's immortalized. This chicken restaurant was founded by legendary country singer Kenny Rogers and former Kentucky Fried Chicken CEO John Brown Jr., who was also a former governor of the state of Kentucky. With a famed country singer and a bigwig with the KFC Corporation on board, this place took off quick. By 1995, they had more than 350 locations. They featured wood-fire rotisserie chicken, and they later expanded to include turkey and ribs. But that rotisserie chicken idea caught on elsewhere, and Boston Market became competition, as well as Kentucky Fried Chicken creating their rotisserie gold. Incredibly, within 3 years of that peak in 1995, they had filed for bankruptcy and were bought by Nathan's, the hot dog company. By 2008, Kenny Rogers Roasters was closed in the U.S. as Nathan's had sold the company to their Asian franchisee, Asian Pacific Limited. So Kenny Rogers Roasters lives in Asia. There's more than 150 locations there, but none in the U.S. Number 4 is D-Lights. This chain was established in 1978 in Norcross, Georgia. Their big claim to fame was fast food with a greater emphasis on nutrition, which immediately seems like it could be an issue because how many people go to a fast food restaurant for stuff that's healthy? It was simple, though. Lean beef, high-fiber buns, low-calorie cheese, things like that. Initially, this idea caught on. It was a popular alternative, and there was more than 100 stores by their peak in 1985. But those of us that lived in the 80s, grew up in the 80s, you know that a lot of fast food restaurants suddenly started to have more nutritional choices. And that became a problem for D-Lights. If you've got McDonald's and Wendy's offering more nutritional choices, why are people going to go to a smaller place? So by the end of 1986, D-Lights had filed for bankruptcy. And the next year, 1987, all D-Lights restaurants closed down. And finally, number 5 on the list of top 5 discontinued fast food chains is Chi-Chi's. Chi-Chi's was a Mexican fast food chain, a little bit similar to Taco Bell. They were founded in 1975 in Richfield, Minnesota, by former Green Bay Packer player Max McGee and restaurateur Marno McDermott, whose wife was nicknamed Chi-Chi, so that's probably where they got the name from. In addition, the chain was run by former Kentucky Fried Chicken executive Shelley Frank, so there was good leadership there too, and the company grew. By early 1995, there were 210 Chi-Chi's in the country. And those of you that grew up then probably saw the commercials. They were on TV a lot. I remember them. Chi-Chi's got hit with a double whammy that basically spelled the end of them. In October 2003, they filed for bankruptcy, which is bad enough. But a month later, November 2003, they had the largest hepatitis A outbreak in American history. 4 people died, and 660 others got sick in the Pittsburgh area alone. There were lots of lawsuits brought, And by July 2004, when the last of the lawsuits had been settled by Chi-Chi's, they only had 65 restaurants, or less than half, remaining from their peak. In August 2004, Outback Steakhouse bought the remaining Chi-Chi's locations, but shut them down and didn't keep the Chi-Chi's name or properties or anything. And in September 2004, all of the Chi-Chi's were closed. And that'll wrap up the top 5 discontinued fast food chains. I tried my best to keep this to fast food. I want to do another list for discontinued casual restaurants, because there's a lot more of those too. But which one of these in the top 5 and the honorable mentions were your favorite? I can tell you honestly that growing up on Cape Cod, we didn't have any of these. But the irony is we have a Red Barn pizza restaurant in Eastham, but it's not associated with the old fast food place, obviously.